Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com, debatephysics.com also. Video presentation. So, yeah, this was kind of a depressing, something I fell upon. So I had bookmarked apparently this old video from a couple of years ago, and I just happened to hit the bookmark and realized I had posted a response video 2 years ago. Actually, a pretty good video. I didn't realize how different my videos were 2 years ago. But anyway, um, and this is the ballistic pendulum that I've been talking about recently. So that's kind of funny that it's become much more of a talking point for me than it was 2 years ago. But the argument's still very much the same argument, and it's all connected to the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour versus the 10-ton train going 5, and how they must have the same energy. And this is the intermediate step, okay, where you're changing the mass instead of 2 to 1, it's 5 to 1. And then you have the more clear example of the bullet, where you have 1,000 to 1 differential in the masses. And in all cases, this heat component is referenced as, they say, well, when you added the 5 mass to the 10, you create a bunch of heat. Okay, and you lost half the energy to a bunch of heat or noise or deformation. But you can't have done that if you conserved 99.9% of the momentum. If you conserve the momentum, if there was any heat, it has to come out of your momentum, just like friction takes your momentum. You can't keep your momentum and make heat. You can't do that. And here, this video, he's basically arguing that. Now, it's just very depressing because this guy, I like this guy, okay? He has acquired taste, maybe. I think he's a good teacher. Obviously, I think what he's teaching is wrong, but I'm just saying, as a teacher goes, he's good, he's innovative. I think he knows how to explain things very well. And it's just so depressing that it has these very good lectures, in my opinion. If you're going to believe conventional physics, these are really good lectures. And it only has 815 views. And you're just like, in 2 years. It's just like, this shouldn't have happened. I mean, it's no way they should have 815 views. It should. And mine's the only comment. And he left the comment up, which shows, some degree of, I believe, integrity, in the sense that no other channel will do that. Well, I can't say no other, but most others will delete my response videos. Now, because of YouTube, I can't leave. This is the spam, somebody called it, that I put on the internet. That, yes, now and then I make a response video and I post a link to it. That's my horrible crime. I can't even do that anymore because YouTube has broken my channel's functionality entirely. But anyway, so I did watch my response video, and it was good. I made the point. And I just, so maybe I'll provide a link to this and provide a link to my response video in case you're interested. And we'll just go over it again. Now, I could play his video, and I suppose that might be useful just to show how, see, it's just going to take time, though. And it's really the conclusion that's all that matters, is the fact that the conclusion is, in the end, he ties the circularity up by saying, well, momentum is conserved. And so you see that the momentum is conserved, so you can't conserve the momentum and then claim you lost, in this case, 80% of the kinetic energy is lost. So the little ball bearing, the 1 mass, hits a 4 mass and becomes a 5 mass. And so that's the circumstance. And so the simple argument is that the velocity of the 1 mass is simply spread over the 4 mass extra. And then you have a 5 mass moving with exactly the correct momentum. But it has much less, only 20% of the kinetic energy. So you lost 80% of the kinetic energy. So they just make up this idea that it's heat. See, it has the word heat there crossed out. But there's there can't be heat because you conserve the momentum. So if you still have all your momentum, you couldn't have made heat too. That would be free energy heat. So it just kind of proves the point that there's absolutely no viability for this idea of kinetic energy. It just doesn't have anything to do with this experiment. The experiment is completely a demonstration of momentum. He calls it conservation of momentum. And what it should be called is proof against kinetic energy, because it basically just proves this is not a viable concept. Kinetic energy doesn't transfer. It doesn't do anything. It can't do any work. It's not a real thing. Okay. It's just a stupid fable stuck right in the middle of your physics. It's a holy ghost. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any function. It's just a bunch of distracting nonsense. And the sad part is, in their version of the Bible, the Holy Ghost does all kinds of stuff. It makes all kinds of other particles. It weighs the electron. It does all. It's perverted itself into the story in all kinds of ways. And so now all the rest of the story has been ruined because this Holy Ghost never existed. It was never a real thing. It shouldn't have been part of anything. And the fact that you've made, your cookies with this fake sugar, your cookies are not going to be edible. All right. If you eat them in reality. If you eat them when you're stoned or something, well, maybe. But they're not going to work when you're doing the let's be real thing. All right, so maybe I'll play some pieces of this just because I'm here and I can. So let's see, I probably have to change some values or it'll be too loud.
V. Now watch this. How do I get the speed before the impact? Well, remember that principle of conservation of momentum? Let me come all the way back here. It's right here in this calculation. This calculation is saying that the momentum before is equal to momentum after. And I say at this point then, the individual masses, the capital V, we just did that calculation, so you can get the little v. And so...
Right, so you just reduce the mass and increase the velocity and you'll get the number because you're going to conserve the total quantity. And so again, he's conceding that there's no loss of momentum in the experiment, and basically therefore you can't convert 80% of the kinetic energy into heat and then claim that you conserve the momentum. Again, it makes no sense at all. We'll jump a little bit ahead.
A lot of things. I put them over on the side, but I'll point them out here. The first one your author asks is this right here. He calls it E naught. I called it initial kinetic energy. But as you can see,
and what he's basically going to say here is you lost 80% of the kinetic energy. So we'll let him say it.
Since we've got the small v, we can calculate then how much kinetic energy is there before the impact. Remember, these are in units of joules, so make sure you put down your units for joules, but this is telling us how much total energy we have to work with. Because also in step 2, your author is saying, well, get this number, which is what your author calls E sub F, or what I like to call kinetic energy, and I'll call it final, but again, that's why I don't really like that name either. It's kind of kinetic energy intermediate. It's right in the middle, but I don't want to use it.
Yeah, well, because there's no other way to explain it, because you still have this problem that you're losing 80% of the kinetic energy and yet you're conserving 100% of the momentum, which you can't do.
But anyway, so this calculation you should do. And you should notice when you do it that this number is smaller than that number. Because again, conservation of energy says that what energy you start with is what you'll end with. And so if you create any heat, and we did because of the rubbing, then you will have...
So again, it'll say that 80% of the energy is in the heat, but of course they didn't measure any such heat, and it's clearly not much heat because you conserved almost all of the momentum. So obviously, whatever heat you made, it was infinitesimal, not substantial.
Have a number here that is smaller, and they want you to notice that right away. It's smaller, and you'll notice it's quite a bit smaller, percentage-wise. I think that's always a surprise. That always surprises students. They feel like they've done something wrong.
Right, right. So even they have every indication that there's something critically wrong with this formulation, that it just really can't be telling the truth. they're going to just keep trying to blow it up and hype it up and say, okay, it's somehow okay. So he starts off with it's a little different, the number's a little smaller, and then he gets to, well, actually it's 80% smaller.
But this number is...
I mean, it's missing 80%. I mean, it's 4 times smaller, or 5 times smaller.
actually quite a bit smaller.
5 times smaller, 5 times less than it should be.
It's really about a fifth. This number...
So there you go. So he's sitting there overtly telling you, I've lost 4/5 of the energy, and yet I conserved all the momentum. So somehow, whatever I did, it didn't take any momentum from. So it's like me saying the bowling ball is rolling on the alley, and it gets to a point that I measure it, and it's lost 4/5 of its kinetic energy, but it still has all of its momentum. And so I'm going to say, well, it did something to the alley. Well, how could it do something to the alley if it still has all of its momentum? I mean, that's just not possible.
About a fifth of that number. A little more than a fifth. All right. Now, your third calculation for step 2. So I don't...
Okay, so that was pretty glaring. Probably don't need to go much further, but we'll go to the where he starts to do his proof, where he's establishing the conservation of momentum and basically proving that, yes, we conserved all of our momentum, and yet we lost 80% of the kinetic energy, which is impossible.
And divide it by little m plus big M. And I told you I'd prove this to you, and I'm going to do that now. But I claim that this ratio should be the same as that ratio. If we...
that he's just basically pointing out that this is going to be 1/5, that you lost, 4/5 of the kinetic energy.
We've measured things well. And so I'm going to prove it to you in theory. But at this point, calculate that number. And if that number is close to that number, you can feel good that your calculations are good and my data is good. And
yeah, so it's all fine as long as we accept the circular logic that you can create heat without you using any momentum. So something can conserve 100% of its momentum, and it can make a big giant pile of heat for free, which is just so wrong and stupid that I shouldn't have to make these videos, frankly. I shouldn't have to. It's wrong and stupid that I have to make these videos, because all of you should have gotten it way long ago. I shouldn't have to keep doing this. So this is, like I said, 2 years ago, and then we go back 4 years ago. I've been making these arguments, and they have no effect on you, just none. You're just so belligerently stupid. And it's stupid. It's just stupid to believe this crap when you see this stuff right before your eyes, and it just doesn't make any sense. It can't work that way. So the original experiment that started this years and years ago was a physics girl video where I just said, wow, what you just did was really dumb. And I'd known about the experiment, but I just said, gee, she's sitting there doubling down on this silly story. Okay, so you have a 5 mass and a 5 mass, and this one has motion. Okay, so you're moving a 5 mass in space, and you're now going to combine it with another 5 mass. Okay, they're going to stick together like magnets or something. So it's very clean, very efficient. You haven't lost any forward motion, because any motion combining them is just a little bit of motion doing this. So the velocity hasn't been in any way disrupted. And so now in space you have a 10 mass. Okay, and it's only going to be going, so this start off, going, I should do that in another color just to, because you people do have a little trouble following along. Oh, you can barely see that 5. But anyway, so this is going 10V. Okay, and what's going to happen is you're going to end up with something going 5V here. Okay, so now you have a 10 mass going 5. You started with a 5 mass going 10, and you've perfectly conserved the momentum, and you've eliminated 1/2 the kinetic energy lost. So 1/2 the KE is missing. All right. And so this experiment that he's doing is a ballistic pendulum, and but this one only has a 5-to-1 ratio. So the pendulum's not that big, 4-to-1. So you're going to go from a 1 mass, and you're going to have a combined mass of 5 when you're done. All right. And the simple argument is that you're going to conserve 100% of the momentum almost. All right. And so the 5 mass is going to be going 1/5 of the velocity of this. All right. So that's the simple argument. So we could say this was going 50, and this will be going 10. Okay, velocity. And that's how the data comes out. That's how it works. It does happen that exact way. And in this case, you've lost, 4/5 of the kinetic energy is gone. Okay, well, however to write that. And then the other real example in Professor Lewin's lab, where he shot a bullet into the ballistic pendulum. And so you have the bullet, which is a 1 mass, and now you have a ballistic pendulum that's 1,000 times heavier. Okay, so it's a gigantic mass. Again, you conserve a great deal of the momentum, maybe 95% in this case. Not quite as much, because the fact is the bullet's going to make a mess of the clay. It's going to cause some clay to go in wrong directions. It's going to heat it. So there will be some heat radiation will be stuck inside the clay. And the ballistic pendulum is going to only collect a tiny, 1%, less than 1%, frankly. So you're going to lose, in this case, you're going to lose 99, no, you can't see that, 99.94% of the kinetic energy. So a gigantic, almost every single bit of the kinetic energy is lost. Just doesn't show up. And clearly, the fact that you've conserved so much of the momentum indicates that, yes, okay, you did lose some, so there's some heat in there. But it's only this 5% of the momentum value. It's not 1,999 joules of energy. It's not melting hot in there. And it needs to be melting hot in there for you to explain where you started with 2,000 joules of energy, and you ended up with 1.6. Or 0.06, however you want to look at it. Yeah, 0.06. Sorry. Yeah, so you really lost a lot of energy. And, those are the experiments. And it's decisive, frankly, in terms of proving the point. And again, I could just go to this experiment. I could say, well, you're claiming that a 5 mass going 10 has twice the energy of a 10 mass going 5. Well, tie a string to them and have them have a tug of war. And the fact is, I know with absolute certainty, there'll be no evidence that this has twice the energy. They'll pull apart, and they'll stop right there. They'll do this, and that'll be it. This will not pull this in its direction. It won't happen. And the same thing will happen if you crash them into each other. This will not win the collision. It'll stay right here. Boom. Because they have the same momentum. And that's the only energy that exists, is momentum. The kinetic energy cannot do work in the real universe. It doesn't do anything. It's not lost in this mystical heat or deformation or sound or any of this nonsense they cite. That is a tiny percentage of the energy, and the rest of it is in the collision. The rest of it has to be accounted for. It has to go somewhere in every circumstance. It has to dent fenders, or they have to reflect with exactly with what went in. That's the rule, all right? And it's demonstrated in all of these experiments. And it's a decisive proof, and I just don't understand why do I have to continue to argue something where the professor's telling you, yes, we conserved almost all of the momentum, therefore we couldn't have done any work anywhere because we have all of the momentum still, and you lost 4/5 of the kinetic energy. I mean, how can you do that? How can you do work to lose it, to heat something, to make something happen somewhere, to transfer it somewhere, and yet you didn't transfer it as momentum? The momentum is all conserved. It makes no frickin' sense. And then the fact that you, in 350 years, you have no evidence of this theory being correct. And all you had is back in the 1700s, you fooled a few people with little denting clay with round objects, and then you rolled stuff and you said, look, so I roll it twice as fast, it goes 4 times further. Well, that's because friction isn't fair. There's a lot less friction when it's rolling fast because the gravity, okay, is less per inch on the surface. Just a fact. It's less pressure per inch. I move something quickly over a scale, there's less pressure on the scale. It will read a different number. Okay, it's just an absolute fact that you're transferring less energy the faster something's moving across a combining surface, an interacting surface, a surface that can take the energy away. The faster you go across that surface, the less contact you have with the surface, the less electricity, so to speak, can go through the surface. If I take a wire, a bare wire, and quickly move it across the surface, I can't make as good a contact with that surface, and I won't transfer as much electricity to the other surface. So again, what can I say? You're going to say you're honest players in this conversation, that you care about the truth, that you care about science. I am saying it's obvious you don't, because I really shouldn't have to make this argument over and over and over and over again with no counter argument from any of you. You can't explain it. You can't say, yes, I still believe that the 8-pound bowling ball can somehow knock down twice as many pins when all it can do is transfer its momentum. That's all it can give the pins, is the same exact momentum. The 16-pound ball going 8 and the 8-pound ball going 16, they're going to give the pins exactly the same amount of momentum. I can't change that fact. And yet you say that somehow it's going to transfer more energy? I mean, it's just nonsense. And it's just so depressing that you're so dishonest, that you won't just yield and say, okay, I get it. Physics made a mistake 300 years ago, and then they made another mistake 250 years ago, and then they made another mistake back in Joule, and the other player then was Lord Kelvin. He was the biggest physicist in the world at that time. And it's basically his fault because he basically endorsed this living force crap. And but they had nothing. They didn't have any experimental evidence proving this crap. And and the big dodge is the gravity argument. So maybe I'll just throw that in because that's where it all started. So I might as well go where it all starts. And the experiment they haven't done. Okay. And the experiment that the lever proves, like I said, I went through all of these arguments. The lever proves what equals what. So I mean, I shouldn't have to. That's another one that's just decisive. You know it, I know it. I put a 2 mass here, 1 distance. I put a 1 mass, 2 distances. This is going to go twice the velocity. This is going to go 1 velocity. This is a 2 mass, 1 velocity. This is a 2 mass. I mean, a 1 mass going 2 velocity. It's equal. So twice the speed at half the mass. Okay. And then if I was to increase that to 4, that is, I was to make this a 1 mass out here and a 4 mass here. So if I just change this to a 4 mass and I make this 4 units of distance, I'm going to get 4 times the velocity. So 1 mass going 4v will equal 4 mass going 1v. That's what the lever says. Okay, but yes, okay, you do this in gravity, you go 4 units of distance, and you're only going to get twice the velocity. You're only going to be in the gravity twice the time. It's a time-dependent force. You can only get 2 units of the gravity because you're only going to get 2 units of time. So it's only 9.8. It's okay. It's only 19.6. It's only twice the energy. Newton said it. Twice the force, twice the motion. 3 times the force, 3 times the motion. And you just keep denying it. So you keep saying this has 4 times the energy when, no, you say this. Let's just do it this way. I mean, you do say it has 4 times, because if I use a 1 mass going 1 distance, you're going to say that this has 4 times that. That somehow in this 1 unit of time, where you only gained 1 unit of velocity, that somehow you gain 3 units of energy. So this is 3 units of energy. This would be 1 unit of energy. Same gravity affecting you, okay? Same time is the same. Time wasn't warped. It's only 2 units, all right? And so the 4 dropped 1 does not equal, okay, the 1 dropped 4, because it's only 2 units of time and it's only twice the velocity. It has to be 4 times the velocity to equal the 4 mass dropped 1 unit of time, 1 unit of velocity. All right. Yeah, I mean, it's just... You're being evil, frankly. There's just no other way to... There's no other concept for this. You're as bad as lying scum flat earth conspiracy theories. Okay? This is a conspiracy. You have this flat earth. You have this flat energy theory. It has no evidence backing it up. You haven't pursued to gain any evidence. You didn't drop 4 pounds 1 foot and 1 pound dropped 4 feet. You didn't crash cars. You didn't put a thermometer in the ballistic pendulum. You haven't done any of these experiments, none of them, to prove this point. And in 300 years, and you just keep claiming it's the truth, and there's no physical evidence. And then you're going to say you're fair cops, you're defending the integrity of science and the scientific method. You haven't obeyed the scientific method. You haven't given a shit about the scientific method. You're just frickin' whores. You're just pimping science. Selling it because it's fun and wooey, and not selling it because it's the goddamn truth. Because the truth is, this proves it's nonsense. These arguments are decisive proofs that it's nonsense. It doesn't happen. It's not real. It's a false axiom. All right. Yeah, that should be just, the whole thing is just quite distasteful. I just never expected so many humans to be scummy liars, and you're just proving the percentage of scummy liar is gigantic. That finding an honest human is really, really difficult. Yeah, there just are so few of them. They're just scum. Lying, rude, obnoxious, religious, silly, fucking liars.